Hi, I'm Colette Patt. I'm the Diversity Director in the Mathematical and Physical Sciences at the University of California, Berkeley. And today I'm going to encourage you to apply for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program as part of your application to graduate schools and fellowships. If you are in the mathematical, physical, computer or biological sciences or engineering, or the social and behavioral sciences, this is a very important fellowship. The National Science Foundation Fellowship is considered the gold standard fellowship, and it is an important prize and a source of important funding for graduate students in these fields. The fellowship is 3 years of funding, and you will receive $30,000 in stipend, and in addition to that, you will receive your tuition and fees paid at the institution that you go to, whichever institution that is. One very important aspect of the National Science Foundation Fellowship is that once you win it, it belongs to you. It's a portable fellowship. It doesn't belong to the institution you go to. It's yours. And wherever you go to school, if you go to one of the schools that is eligible to receive the NSF, you will take it with you, and if you decide that that program isn't working for you and you transfer to another institution to complete your studies, you will take the NSF with you there as well. So that's an important kind of portable fellowship that can help you support your graduate education, particularly doctoral studies. To apply for the National Science Foundation Fellowship, you will need to look very carefully at the solicitation, read through the solicitation several times, and prepare your application as follows. The National Science Foundation has two major criteria that it will look throughout your application to see if you have met. It will not ask you at any point to directly address these two criteria, but the reviewers, there will be usually 2 or 3 reviewers for your application, will be looking to see if you have met these criteria. The two criteria are 1, intellectual merit, and 2, broader impacts. I will explain a little bit about what each of those criteria are. Intellectual merit is your preparation to complete graduate study, your preparation to conduct research, and the meritoriousness or the worth or the value of the research that you propose to do as a graduate student. Broader impact is the ways in which your work, your science, your research, or you as an individual will have a broader impact on society. So those are very just easy ways to think about those two criteria. As you complete the application, be sure to address both of those criteria within your essays. The format of the National Science Foundation Fellowship application is that you complete a good deal of demographic information about yourself, standard questions, your name, your address, where you went to high school, and so on. All of that is done online. And then you complete 3 substantive essays. The 3 substantive essays are a personal statement, a prior research statement, and a proposed research statement. I'm going to address the prior research statement first, then the proposed research, and then the personal statement. The prior research statement is an essay explaining your preparation for graduate study and your preparation for the research you wish to conduct as a graduate student. In that essay, you will describe the full array of your academic preparation with a focus on any prior research that you've conducted. And here's a tip. For those of you who are in what one might call wet lab disciplines, biology, chemistry, so on, you will be focusing more intensely on your prior research per se. So the various research experiences that you've had. For those of you who are in what we might call dry lab fields, the driest lab of all being mathematics, so the more abstract theoretical fields, For those of you in those fields, you probably won't have done quite as much research. Perhaps you won't have done any as an undergraduate. In those fields, or perhaps not any original research, in those fields, you will be focusing more on your academic preparation, the courses that you've taken, and how they've prepared you for your graduate study. If you have done research, please make sure to mention the research and explain how that's helped you prepare for your advanced study in mathematics, physics, engineering, etc. The proposed research statement is a statement where you explain the kind of research that you'd like to do as a graduate student, as a doctoral student. Now, most students, as they finish up their undergraduate work and start their graduate studies, do not actually know very clearly what kind of research they'd like to do. If you're in that position, that's fine. What the NSF is interested in and what reviewers are looking for is whether you can craft a clear and coherent statement about what kind of research you might do and how you would go about doing that research. Most undergraduates have never tried to craft that kind of statement before. So if you haven't, don't worry about it. That's fine. Here are some broad rules for how to go about crafting that kind of statement. So you don't have to follow these rules. This is just advice on one way to approach crafting the proposed research statement. Start with a broad explanation of the area of research that interests you. Then explain what kind of research is conducted, what kind of questions are asked in that broad area of research. Then explain what other people, established scholars, have done in that area, how they've approached those questions, how they have narrowed the questions in that down to questions that they could answer or parts of questions that they could answer, and explain the work of 2 or 3 major scholars in that subfield or field, that area of research. Be sure to cite those scholars or give references to them, and those citations or references will appear in the body of your proposed research statement. There isn't a separate place to put them. So you can either cite them within the text, or you can use footnotes to cite or reference those scholars and their work. Just 2 or 3. Then explain which part of the remaining questions in the field are of interest to you and how you intend to go about researching them. To the extent that you know it, describe the methodology that you'll use. Describe, if you know it, the kinds of instruments that you might use and the kinds of answers that you might be seeking. When you write your proposed research statement, do it as a draft and show it to somebody who's an established scholar in the field. That could be either your own faculty mentor, a faculty mentor with whom you've done research at another institution or a national lab, a postdoctoral fellow who you have worked with or who you know in your department, or a graduate student. They will be able to give you very valuable advice on how to fine-tune what you've written, how to explain your research ideas in more detail, and they will give you good advice if you have written anything in this statement that wouldn't make sense, or if you're proposing research that's already been done, or if you've missed a major reference that you should have cited. So please do not try to do that on your own. Please seek help from people who are researchers in the field of the research that you're proposing, or who are researchers in the broad field that the research takes place in, even if they're not conducting research in that specific subfield or on those specific questions that interest you. Please do get help working on that proposed research statement. It's a very unusual kind of statement for an undergraduate to be fully prepared to address without any kind of consultation with their faculty mentors, graduate students, or postdoctoral friends or advisors. The third statement that you need to address is your personal statement. The personal statement gives a sense of who you are as an intellectual, so it's personal, but it's not intimate. It's personal, but it's about your development as a scholar. It's a lot like a personal statement that you might give in some graduate applications. It describes how you became interested in science, what you've done to prepare yourself in science, any difficulties or roadblocks that you've encountered and how you have overcome them. It describes your personal commitments in science and your goals in science. For the personal statement, the personal statement is often the right place to discuss the broader impacts that you intend to have as a scientist. So, turning a little bit to more general statements about how to prepare the NSF application. Often I'm asked questions about what tone to take and what kind of language to use. The tone and language that you use should be very straightforward. You should try to recall the best of what you learned in your reading and comp classes as a freshman and use those skills. So just clear writing, short sentences, make sure that it's easy to read. The reviewers do not have a lot of time to read each application, so you want to make sure that your points are very clearly made. You do not need to use a lot of technical jargon. The people reviewing your application may not be exactly in your subfield. They may not understand all the intricate technical jargon in that particular subfield, or they may not be familiar with it. So you want to talk at the level that you might talk to a fellow senior as an undergraduate or first-year graduate student. Don't try to use fancy words that you yourself do not understand. Make sure that you understand everything that you're saying, and make sure that the whole application reads very clearly and very smoothly. As you can tell, this is not the kind of document that you prepare or the kind of application that you prepare overnight. You need to work on it in advance. I usually recommend that people spend about a month working on it for a few hours each day, so maybe 2 or 3 hours each day, writing, rewriting, drafting, showing drafts to people and getting feedback, making sure that it reads very clearly and very well and that you've said everything you really most want to say in the application. In terms of going back to the issue of the 2 criteria and how best to make sure that you've addressed them, your prior research statement and your proposed research will give the reviewers a pretty good sense of your intellectual merit, both your merit as a scholar and the merit of the research that you're proposing to do, and therefore its fundability by the National Science Foundation. The broader impacts can be addressed in several different ways, and I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list, but I'm going to give you a few examples. So the broader impacts can be addressed by talking about how your research itself will have a broader impact beyond the findings that will be of interest to you and the members of your lab or your group. The broader impacts could be the application of your research findings to important social questions, to important health questions, or to important questions that society asks of the world in general. So you should think a little bit about how your research might contribute a small part to answering larger questions of importance to society. There are some fields in which that is very clearly applicable and quite easy to do or quite straightforward to do. There are other fields or types of research where that's very, very difficult to do because, in fact, the research itself doesn't have an obvious or immediate broader impact or will not clearly or predictably lead to some kind of a broader impact. It's interesting to people and important to people in the field, but perhaps it's not yet known how that research might be used for other purposes down the road. If you're in a field like that, or if your research interests are of that sort, there are many other ways to address the broader impacts criterion. So one way to address broader impacts is to talk about the importance of communicating science and how you might be an effective communicator of science and ambassador for science. Of course, in our society, we're very interested in ensuring that people who are not, who have not yet had access to science, or communities that have not yet had access to science, will have increased access to science. If you can be an effective communicator of science and representative and ambassador of science to a community that does not ordinarily have easy access to science, that's an important asset that you bring to our society and an important role that you can play as a scientist. Please emphasize that. To do that, you can either talk about outreach projects that you might get involved with, or you can talk about ways in which you will be an effective role model or an effective person in encouraging and supporting other people to get into science. You need to be sure to do that both by explaining what your goals are and how you'll go about doing that, and providing some evidence that you have done that in the past, or that you have taken steps toward doing that in the past. You don't have to have done anything major. You can have done small things that are helpful to other people. Be sure to mention those. So, summing up, there are 3 major essays: the personal statement, the prior research, and the proposed research, and 2 major criterion: the intellectual merits and the broader impacts. Be sure to apply for the National Science Foundation Award. It's an incredibly important and helpful form of fellowship to have. Good luck.